Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the third in our current series of our Insolvent IP webinars. This is our webinar entitled Crack the Code, the New World of Apps in Insolvency. So thank you very much for joining us today. We hope you'll be able to learn some new information about software and insolvency specific advice. So the presenters today, it's me, Maura from Fraser. I am the IP Sales Manager here at Metis Partners in the Corporate Recovery and Restructuring team. And we also have our guest speaker, Stephen Beer, who is Managing Director of Bridgall. He has been in partnership with his two founding co-directors and has led Bridgall from 2003 to become an innovative and thriving IT services firm. The Glasgow-based company delivers software development services and managed IT services. Bridgall is a Microsoft Gold partner in application development and focuses on SharePoint, .NET and Power BI. A key strength lies in delivering certainty on complex, time-challenged and substantial development projects. Recent projects have included the development of the market settlement system for the £2.5 billion competitive water market in England. The solution development took 2,500 days worth of effort, and after 6 months of industry testing, only 7 minor defects were reported. With a career in IT now spanning more than 30 years, Stephen has a PhD in software engineering from the University of Strathclyde, has worked for Oracle, been an independent consultant and managing director of several firms. So we're very grateful to Stephen for providing his time and expertise on the webinar today. But who are we? We are, as you know, Metis Partners, an intellectual property evaluation firm with a proven track record in the assessment, exploitation, monetisation, valuation and sale of IP assets. We're headquartered in Glasgow. We work mostly in the UK with North American, European and Asian experience, although we do sell IP assets globally. Our corporate recovery team, as you know, provides commercial practical advice on how to deal with intellectual property in insolvency or distress scenarios. And we would note we're not lawyers. We do take a commercial approach and try to provide commercial solutions to IP issues in insolvency. Now, this webinar today, so identifying both formal and informal IP assets is our area of expertise. But today, the purpose of this webinar is to help you think about the value of software and apps, as well as potential pitfalls and any difficulties that you might have in dealing with them in insolvency. We'll get some practical insights from our guest speaker, who's going to share his experience of recognising commercial value in software, with a focus on distress and insolvent scenarios, as well as the key things that he looks for in software from a buyer's perspective, which I'm sure is going to be of great interest to many of you out there. So we're going to talk a little bit about what software is, then we'll do a short poll to make sure you guys are all awake. Then we're going to talk a little bit more with Stephen to discuss the commercial value of software in insolvency. And as always, we'll have our 5 key takeaways, what to do in your next case. So, software. What is software? Software is a small word for a large area of assets, particularly in insolvency. So software is part of a computer system that comprises data or computer instructions in contrast to physical hardware, such as a monitor or a keyboard. There's lots of different types of software, such as application programs. That's things like Microsoft Word, Google Chrome browser, or Adobe Photoshop. System software, like operating systems, such as Windows or Linux. Web applications, such as Facebook, LinkedIn, eBay, Pinterest. And mobile native apps, such as WhatsApp, Uber, Instagram. Mobile applications have become popular within software development in recent years as the market is widely accessible. Smartphone penetration in the UK leapt from 52% to 81% of the population in the 4 years to May 2016. And smartphone users, as you yourselves know, are often active on their phones, and so it's easy for developers to reach users via mobile apps. However, this is also a challenging market, as according to the same report, the majority of survey participants have downloaded less than 20 apps or fewer, and the app market is saturated with millions of apps available to software consumers, and 2 competing apps could perform very similar tasks. For example, Snapchat's image story functionality, which is now found on WhatsApp, and the Facebook mobile app. Mobile app development can be difficult. In mobile app development, it can be difficult to protect unique functions, as developers with technical know-how can also develop algorithms that perform the same functions, leading to lots of different types of apps, but perhaps with the same underlying tech contained within. Now, we're going to do a quick poll if our technology works. So we want you to guess the biggest tech acquisition of 2016. Oracle buying NetSuite, DD Chuxong buying Uber China, SoftBank buying ARM Holdings. What do you think was the highest tech acquisition? So the highest monetary value, obviously. Well, people are going for it. So we'll give you another kind of 10 seconds to think about it. All of them have now been picked, and there's some dubiety about two of them. One of them is a lot less popular than the others. Okay, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. So the answer is that SoftBank buying ARM Holdings was the highest at $31.6 billion. So 41% of you got that right. 36% of you thought that DD Chuxong buying Uber China was the highest. That actually was $7 billion. And Oracle buying NetSuite was actually $9.5 billion. And that was 23% of you. So here we go. Now, software development methodologies and languages. So when we're thinking about software, we're thinking about a lot of different types of aspects that need to be considered when you're considering software. Three of these things are the software development methodologies, languages, and quality control. So initially, software development methodologies are used for project management purposes. So examples will include waterfall, agile, and rapid app development. So agile is perhaps the most common one that you might have come across before. It's based on iterative development where requirements and solutions crop up through collaboration between different teams. Languages. The languages that are chosen are based on what type of platform you want to develop for. So the languages are obviously not kind of English, French, German. They are the common programming languages which can be found in mobile native apps such as Java, Objective-C, Swift, which is Apple's new language, C#, which is Microsoft's proprietary language, and quality control. This is unit testing and testing individual elements, and integration testing, where you test all the elements together as a whole. You'll load test for capability and response time, and you have different levels of testing in order to make sure that in errors in daily use you can overcome. Now, our guest today, as mentioned, is Stephen Beer, who's going to briefly introduce himself.
Yes. Hi, so my name's Stephen Beer. I've been involved in the software area for over 30 years now, and you know, I've been an independent software consultant, been a developer. I've run my own companies and led some pretty critical developments over the piece.
Yeah. Great. Thank you very much. So today we're going to ask a number of questions. We're going to talk first off software in general. So for you, what are the key factors, Stephen, that make software attractive for acquisition and insolvency?
Well, I mean, I think what you do have to look at, you know, includes performance, for example, and it depends whether you're taking on an existing system that is in production, or whether it's a system that's partway through development. But for a system that's in production, you should be able to seeking, you know, what is the performance of this software, what is the reliability of it, you know, has this been breaking down regularly, is there evidence to see that. And I think for a future point of view, what is the scalability of it? You know, if it's running with, say, you know, 10,000 users, and the acquirer would like to use it for 1 million users or 100,000, what evidence is there to show from testing that it can support that? So these come into play. Obviously, looking at the types of technology that's been used, whether it's mainstream or whether it's very esoteric, can be a factor in whether you're going to be able to maintain and support that moving forward. And again, the technology could include the database technology at the back end. These things do evolve all the time, and what you want to be, not involved in is some that's perhaps bleeding edge, but also equally not moribund technology that's been around for a long, long time. And so we talk about some examples later on, but for example, there's a company I know who are a very, very big company who one of their critical applications is built on Progress. It's a database and programming language called Progress. And it's mission critical. It's been developed over the last 30 years, but there are really only 2 people in this, many hundred person company and many 100 million turnover company. There are only 2 people who know it. And worse than that, there are very few contractors who are alive today who can come in and maintain and help that. And even those who are available cost a lot of money. So the change has been forced on them, that they're going to have to migrate. And it's been a big development. So that's not an example of insolvency, but equally, for a company being in insolvency, you want to make sure you're not buying that type of application.
Yeah, definitely. And in terms of the development spend to date, would that factor at all into any decision-making process? Obviously, we see a lot of maybe 100 million pounds development spend. Does that factor in at all?
Yeah,
How does that work?
In some ways, it could be the more it's been spent, could be a red flag. Development spend is most definitely not an indicator of quality. Nobody has to look very far to see the number of IT, application development disasters that are out there. Many are out in the public domain because in the public sector, but there's equally many that are hidden, in the private sector. So, what is more important is understanding the development process that's gone into developing that. Again, back to is there a running system, what the performance stats, how reliable has this been, and evidence of the factors we discussed before. It's most definitely not. You need to be looking at the languages, the people involved, a whole range of things. And don't get me wrong, developing larger systems is, developing any system can be quite complex, but you're really looking for, has there been a disciplined approach to development? And if there's not been a disciplined approach, then it's a bit of a red flag. It doesn't really say, don't touch it, but you need to know and then assess what you're going to get into. Yeah.
Okay. And in terms of, from a buyer's perspective, what types of information would be important to you to understand prior to considering an acquisition, potentially prior to insolvency? Yeah,
so if I'm looking at it, if I'm being asked to look at a company that's for sale, for example, or even coming out of insolvency, I'll be looking to know is the development team available, and if they've all scattered to the wind, are any of them going to be available and incentivised to come back in, assuming they are good? And again, sometimes that you need to know what good means. But I would be looking to understand what are the processes that have developed the software. Have they been any good? Again, are they using modern technology? And I would be looking also at, again, from my PR point of view, who has the rights to the software? Is there a contract there? And we'll talk a bit more about that in the future. And what third-party software has been used? If just various components have been used willy-nilly, then we need to look at the contracts that go, or the licenses that go along with that, because that could be a problem. But I thought the bigger thing though is, if we were looking at that, how much would we have to spend to stabilise this this system? Even if it's not perfect, we'll still take a risk and decide that the upside is worth going for. But and I'll come on to an example later on where we reckon we're going to have to spend £200,000, of our own money to take this on, and there was just no chance, given what the vendor thought his software was worth, his business was worth.
And are there types of software that that you think there's a particular market for at the moment?
Well, I think in general what I'd say is, you can make, software is all pervasive. You can make money anywhere. The idea just has to be right. And certainly niche is good, and in any market, I'm not saying any rocket science here, you can make and lose money in any market. You know, one of the things that our company did, so we've been going for 15 years, and we do custom solution development, but we also have developed our own product in the past, and we developed a SaaS, a software as a service offering for public libraries that between 2006 and 2011, there were 6,500 libraries using this software around the world. And that's the public library market, and we did very well. We sold that end of 2011 to Baker & Taylor, one of the biggest book distributors in the US, so it was a really good synergistic sale there. But it didn't, you know, we started off in utilities, and we still are involved in water to this day. We never thought we'd fall into, move into public libraries, but we did, and we ended up making a lot of money from that. So, you know, I'm prefacing that, you know, there's a whole range of areas you could go into. So fintech is very, very hot at the minute, and there's lots of companies focus on that. More generally, cross-sector, Internet of Things is a big thing, and it's probably one of the biggest things that Microsoft are pushing now.
Can you explain a little bit about Internet of Things?
Yeah, so Internet of Things really is about, you know, it's, you know, gathering information through sensors, you know, on anything. You know, the sensor will provide data that gets transported back to some servers, and then it's analysed in certain ways. So, for example, it could be, you know, lift manufacturers knowing when things are going wrong on the lifts worldwide. You know, there's, you know, another example of this is, you know, I think it's Diageo who are using smart labelling on their whiskey bottles, which means that you can actually tell which barrel it came from. So whiskey aficionados can sit, you know, having their in their chair, knowing, you know, it came from a sherry barrel, and that barrel was, you know, 6 years old, and, you know, it had this other stuff in it. So the whole range of very unique things can happen now with Internet of Things, and so it's cross-sector. It's not specific to any sector, but it's a kind of hot area where, if you look to where Microsoft are going, quite often, you know, there's lots of you know, innovation going to be coming there as well.
Okay, thank you. And in terms of kind of more insolvency specific, obviously most businesses now will have some form of software contained within them, whether that be from manufacturing or kind of processing or brands or websites or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
So are there any ongoing liabilities or costs or things like that that insolvency practitioners should be particularly aware of in the first couple of days of their insolvency cases?
Yeah, I mean, I think what it's definitely worth looking at is, you know, the criticality of what the software has been doing. Mm-hmm. So, for example, you know, is it a billing system, and is it a billing system for a company that's processing large sums of money? Because if it is, and there's potential for clients to come back on that, you know, should there have been you know, they find an error 3 months after, you know, the kind of changeover. Again, it's back to whether the old company can come after, sorry, the client come after the new company. Mm-hmm. I think as we've discussed before, brand damage could to come from that, even if, you know, there can't be any financial impact on it. Mm-hmm. So I think the criticality of what the software has been doing, you know, there's lots of software where, and again, it's maybe in the consumer side of things, but if it's an app, you know, if it's, say, a 60 quid a year app, you know, losing a certain amount of your market, it would have an impact, but maybe you can survive with that because you can go and, you know, target that app at other users. So, you know, when it comes down to it, it's got to be quite unique and looking at the case-by-case basis. I think.
Okay. And for instance, let's say that software development's been outsourced. How would an insolvency practitioner go about working out who owns the software? How do typical contracts work in this type of sector, from your experience?
Yeah. So, I mean, in terms of the contracts, if it's being well organised, there should be, and you know, these 5 things I'm going to mention might be in one contract, might be in multiple contracts, but the first one is a development contract, where the client has engaged the company to develop some software for them. which will be, producing deliverable. The IPR rights will be clear, the acceptance criteria will be clear, obviously the cost and timescale, etc. There should be a maintenance contract, so that's after it's gone into production, what is the deal going to be about changes to the software? Are there going to be changes being delivered for a blanket fee over the year, or is it going to be charged per change? There's going to be application support because users need to know how to do certain things, they have queries on what's happened. Operations support, which is really making sure that the service is operational and always there. And the final part is hosting. So those are the five key contracts that should be in place. But when and looking at in any kind of solvency situation, first of all, get a hold of the contracts or contracts that are available. If there are none, then my understanding is, for example, in the software development contract, is the developer who has the IPR. So that could be a big problem for any potential acquirer.
Yeah, I think certainly that's been our experience as well. There are ways round that problem.
Is it? Right.
It depends on how much is owed and how much you think that you can maybe perhaps negotiate with the software developer as to the type of sale that you might be able to do. We've certainly done that in the past, but
yeah.
I think in terms of making sure that you know where it vests and which entity owns it, I think that's certainly something that we would also look at quite closely.
Yes. Yeah.
And I suppose finally, clearly insolvency practitioners have to be relatively conscious of preserving value and they have to be aware of the attractiveness of software in insolvency. Have you seen a particular scenario when software's been tarnished at the insolvency stage or prior to insolvency, or are there significant negative factors in purchasing software both prior and post insolvency?
Yeah, I mean, I can talk about an example very close to home. Well, there's two examples. First one is where we've taken on software for so the client had a software system developed, quite substantial, £1 million development. After 3 years, for whatever reason, the existing developer wanted to move away from it. So we came in, reviewed the architecture, reviewed lots of things that I've mentioned before with the development process, and said, we advise you these things we need to put in place to stabilise the situation, and then also we can do that. So they then engage us to make those, deliver those recommendations, and then for us to support it. So that was the case. It went quite smoothly, but and everybody was happy, because the existing developer was still there. We just wanted to get out of it. Another example though is, again, it's not insolvency, but it was when a company was offered to us for sale. And we looked at the business and the software was critical to that business, and what we found was that the development had been undertaken in Thailand. There was a key person who was a UK person, but he in Thailand was known to the company, the business owners here. He had engaged, I think, 3, 4, 5 developers in Thailand on a contract basis, not staff. We looked at development processes, and there was not much in the way of any rigour around it. There was certainly no automated testing, and without getting into the nature of it, what they were doing was kind of mission critical for the client, and there was no auditability of what testing had been done. There was undisciplined software release management, so that means when they were putting new versions of the software onto the client's cloud environment, it was just happening whenever they felt like it, and there was no rollback procedures to make sure if they made a mistake they could recover from that. They had no idea of how many defects they had. So again, looking at defects, you might have a P1, which is a priority 1, down to priority 3 or 5, which would be cosmetic. And they had no classification for it. So when we asked how many you have, well, we don't really do that. We just fix them. Now, any substantial development, that's just nonsense. And that betrayed their lack of discipline. So basically, we surmised that really this was a seat of the pants software development, basically capability, and also it epitomised their venture. So we did think though that we could stabilise it, because we have a very developed, good disciplined team and processes, but it was going to cost us £200,000, and that just didn't stack up given what they were thinking the company was worth. So we walked away from that. Yeah.
Okay. I think some good lessons there, hopefully. In terms of further kind of complications that can arise during insolvency or just prior to insolvency, we've got a couple of pitfalls that insolvency practitioners may wish to look out for. So, for instance, as Stephen mentioned, the rights to the software are really important. It's really important to know who owns them. In addition, it's really important to know if the software is open source or it's been developed in-house or by a developer. Software source code, as we mentioned earlier, might be held by third-party hosting companies, and it can be difficult to extract. It doesn't mean it's impossible, but it is certainly something that you should be aware of. And obviously, in a number of insolvency cases, the company is going to owe fees in relation to its software, and it's important to know which ones are critical fees that must be paid and which fees might be less critical to monetising the asset. A couple of things that are important to bear in mind when you're going to be selling software. It's important that technical staff might be available for due diligence. If technical staff are not available, that might impact the price of the software, because what will happen is any potential acquirer is not going to be able to carry out the due diligence to their satisfaction, and therefore will reduce their price. Doesn't mean that they won't bid for it, just means that it's unlikely you would be able to maximise the returns. And in terms of the format of technical due diligence, that's dependent upon what's available. But there are ways to safely provide ways of viewing code, for instance, or viewing certain aspects of the source code itself. That's not something that we would advise kind of whole scale, but there are ways to show to potential parties what the quality of code would look like. So, 3 things to watch out for. Ensure that the company that you are appointed to has the rights to the software. Secure and limit access to the source code. So whether that's taking it off the cloud and putting it on a server, or putting it in a server that's inside your office and making sure there's no VPNs that are connected to that code. And where possible, obviously speak to a professional. Now, the 5 key takeaways, and then we'll move on to any questions that you guys might have. And please feel free to ask questions in the little questions pane, if you have any. The 5 key takeaways: quickly get to grips with ownership issues. Number 2, understand where there is whether there is any outstanding fees to be paid upon the software itself, or whether you have free and clear access to it. Number 3, secure and limit access to the software source code to make sure that nobody else can access it. 4, evaluate whether there are funds potentially in the case for key technical staff who are available to support technical due diligence. And 5, beware of any IP protection issues during technical due diligence. So, for instance, purchasers might want to view the code in its entirety, but that's not certainly something that we would advise. There are a lot of software programs now that can read the source code, and you would effectively be giving a copy of that to the purchaser without payment. So, finally, we have our IP asset checklist. This will be sent to all of you after the webinar. And finally, thank you for listening to the webinar today. If you've got any, if you wish to discuss any of your IP needs in more detail, get in touch with me. If you've got any software questions, either contact Stephen, or I'm happy to pass on any emails that you might want to send. But does anyone have any questions right now? I understand that we're running slightly over time. Anybody got anything at the moment that they want to have a quick question about? I think everybody's quite keen to get to the weekend at this point. Thank you all very much for listening, and we hope to see you again at our next Insolvent IP webinar. We will be sending out an email about that later on. We're going to finish this series for the summer and then pick it back up again in the autumn. But thanks very much for your time, everyone. Bye-bye.